Engage, a podcast from the Delta Master Executive Council.
Thank you for listening to Engage. Today's episode is on the art of negotiations. This episode will focus on Section 6 process and resuming mediated contract 2019 negotiations. With negotiations scheduled to restart next week, it's a good time to review Section 6 of the Railway Labor Act and what this process looks like for us. Many of our pilots have never gone through an entire Section 6 negotiation before. We've hired over 4,000 pilots since contract 2015, and many pilots may not have been part of an airline contract negotiation. To help cover these topics today, we have with us MEC Chairman Captain Jason Ambrosi and Chad Smith, the chair of the Delta MEC Negotiating Committee, and from our ALPA legal team, Andrew Brenner. Thank you all for joining us. Jason, welcome. We're re-engaging with the company next week in mediated talks. Could you give us a high-level overview on where we are and what we can expect going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first podcast of this kind. This has been successful at other properties. It's kind of new for us, so bear with us, and we think this will be a good product going forward. My name is Jason Ambrosi. I'm a 7 ER captain here in Atlanta. I've been with Delta about 22 years, so I've been through the ups of Contract 2000, the downs of furlough after 9/11, the major downs of bankruptcy, and now back to where we're back up on the top of the industry, followed by COVID, and where we are today. So I've been through it. Where are we right now? Section 6 was paused with COVID, so it's time to get back at it. I've been asked whether with this spike we should continue, and the answer is yes. We don't know what's going to come in the future. Is it going to be spike after spike? However, the time is now to get back into it. The union's priorities have not changed since we started the Section 6 process. An industry-leading contract that you deserve. We've done considerable prep work before re-engaging. Several rounds of statistically valid polling, a comprehensive survey. I want to thank you because it had a significantly better turnout than the original Contract 2019 survey. I've been asked why survey? Because we want to make sure we deliver a contract that reflects the desires of our membership. We've had demographic changes since we originally entered Section 6, as well as this COVID pandemic has tested parts of our contract that we may have been completely unaware of. Quality of life issues, things like deadhead and positive space, commute, things that we didn't even put as much pressure on as we may have before. Also, the MEC was very engaged in the direction. We had a special meeting where many of your reps were not at the table when we originally set direction for Contract 2019. They saw all of the direction where we are. Chad and his team did an excellent job of briefing the MEC at our current progress, what's been done, where we're at, and where we need to go. I will say our focus remains on the 4 pillars: scope, pay, retirement, and quality of life. Pilot resolve is stronger than ever. You have helped this company through this pandemic. You are truly frontline leaders, and now is the time for the company to invest in its pilots. Invest in us. I'll turn it back to you, Evan.
Thanks, Jason. Let's talk a little bit about our negotiators, just to kind of introduce, who's sitting at the table for us. Captain Chad Smith, welcome. Could you take a moment to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the negotiating committee for those that might be unaware?
Sure. Good morning, Evan. Happy New Year to you. Good to be back at it. My name's Chad Smith. I'm the chairman of the negotiating committee. I'm a 767-400 captain. I live up in Athens, Georgia, with 2 kids. I've got a junior at the University of Georgia, and I have a senior in high school on his way to the Coast Guard Academy next year. I've been at Delta about 25 years. I'll introduce the rest of the team as well. I'll try to keep it short, but it's important you know who's going to be sitting at the table with us for the rest of the negotiation. Eric Criswell is negotiator number 2. We have 4 total. He's an Airbus 320 captain, been here about 11 years, going on 12. I think he turns 12 in September, if I recall correctly. Brandon Conwell is the 737 first officer. I've been at Delta 7 years. And Rich Wheeler is our 4th negotiator. He's a 717 captain. He's 23 years old, going on 24, originally from Northwest Airlines. Also, Jason is part of the negotiating committee by his title as the Delta MEC chairman. He belongs to every committee, including the negotiating committee. He usually relinquishes that seat to a seat filler. And generally speaking, that is a gentleman by the name of Greg Hurley, who's a 767 captain, former Northwest as well, been here a total of 24 years. Negotiating committee's been together about 4 years, various times for all of us, but all said and done, we just passed 4 years total as a team on the negotiating committee. Rich has been here a little bit less. Eric's been here a little more, but generally speaking, we're sitting on about 4 years of experience total.
Hey, that's great. Sounds like a really good team you got put together. I'd like to introduce Andrew Brenner. Thanks for joining us today. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and the role that you play on the team?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Evan. My name is Andrew Brenner. I'm the MEC coordinator and senior labor relations counsel for the Delta MEC. I serve as an advisor to the elected pilot leadership and support the negotiating committee at the bargaining table, formulating negotiating proposals, discussing negotiating strategy, and crafting contract language. I'm just one part of the team of professional ALPA staff who support the negotiating committee. I'd be remiss without also mentioning Assistant Director of Representation Art Luby and Financial Analysis Manager Patrick Cropper from ALPA's Economic and Financial Analysis Department, among others who are there supporting the committee.
All right, thanks for being with us. So let's talk a little bit about why it's important to have various folks at the negotiating table for us. So why it's important to have both pilots and professional negotiators at the table for us. Chad, could you speak to that a little bit? Kind of why you're there as a pilot and why we've got folks like Andrew and Art Luby joining us?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always important. The debate goes back and forth every single contract cycle. Should we hire professional negotiators? And our response is that we do have professional negotiators. Andrew and Art. Andrew kind of stole my thunder. I was going to introduce Art a little bit later down the road, but that's Andrew and Art have been doing this forever. Art particularly has been doing this a long time. Has testified in front of Congress. Was responsible for a lot of the negotiation with regard to the CARES Act funding. So there's a lot of good experience there on the ins and out of the Railway Labor Act and processes. But you never can replace the knowledge base that pilots have and the skin in the game that with regard to the contract intricacies. Nobody can explain a reroute better to the opposite team, the company's team, or to the mediator as to how reroute works. Nobody can really tie the strategy of negotiating with the actual knowledge of the contract more so than a pilot. So we can get whoever we need. We hire outside industry consultants all the time. And again, we have our solid team of ALPA National, the core team of professionals that have done this essentially since the beginning of time and brought knowledge forward from their predecessors as well.
All right, Andrew, do you have anything to add when it comes to having professional negotiators and pilots at the table?
Yeah, sure, Evan. I often hear questions from Delta pilots about professional negotiators. I think there's a common mistaken perception about that. I think Chad covered it well. It's important that the Delta pilots are aware here at Delta MEC and actually at all ALPA pilot groups, professional negotiators support pilot negotiators. ALPA's representation department staff includes dozens of experienced professional negotiators, seasoned attorneys, and expert labor relations advisors. ALPA has more attorneys who have negotiated pilot collective bargaining agreements under the RLA than any law firm, airline, or other airline labor union. It's essential to have pilot negotiators at the table as well. They are often subject matter experts in many areas of the PWA and in the best position to understand the impact of various contractual provisions. And when the deal is done, the pilots on the negotiating committee live under the negotiated agreement. It can make a difference when talking about tentative agreement to fellow pilots. Just knowing that this TA will impact the negotiators the same as every other pilot on the line. I believe at most other pilot unions, it's quite common to have pilot negotiators at the bargaining table.
Sure. It sounds like you get a lot of support from ALPA National in terms of the ability to kind of figure out numbers and information and work on developing a strategy. What kind of support, if you can go into a little bit more depth about the support you get from National, what do they help you bring to the table?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Whatever I need, basically, is the long story short of it. Whatever we need, we can delegate resources to. Andrew already talked about ALPA National. Art Luby, the Assistant Director of Representation. Patrick Cropper is our wizard on costing. Any kind of data manipulation, any kind of data crunching. Patrick Cropper, the Managing Financial Analysis for ALPA, just an outstanding individual. We've got a host of retirement and insurance specialists up at ALPA National who know the intricacies of insurance law and retirement legal interpretations. If we need outside consulting, we can hire professionals. For example, we just concluded negotiations on the market-based cash balance plan. As part of that, we hired a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers. Most of the pilots have probably heard of that entity before, and they'll actually be the one managing our new market-based cash balance plan. So, again, that was kind of a short story long, but whatever we need, we can command. We have the resources to do it here at Delta, and we have the base knowledge up at ALPA National for the run-of-the-mill kind of stuff.
Excellent. So it sounds like we bring a pretty good, pretty solid team to the table. In terms of who we're sitting across from at the table during negotiations, who's sitting across from us on the company side, if you can get into that?
Sure. It's a good team. We've known them quite a while. Kind of leading their team, I would say, is a gentleman named Mark Esposito. He's their Managing Director of Labor Relations. You know, everybody thinks there's a whole team of lawyers sitting in the room. He's really the only lawyer. Those of you who remember JetBlue a couple years ago got their initial contract. They used to be not unionized. They are unionized now. They're an ALPA entity, and they got their first contract with Mark sitting on the company side of that negotiation against Art Luby, of all things. So that was a pretty lucrative contract for the JetBlue guys. So he's their kind of their lead, if you will, at the table. The pilot lead at the table is a gentleman named Brian Pickett. I think he's a 220 check airman. He's their negotiator on the pilot side, if you will. He's a director level for their fleet training administration. Another staple over there is a lady named Lourdes Di Pietro. She's a manager in labor relations over there, kind of their organizer. When we send all the electronic documents over, she's the one who receives them and keeps them organized on the company side, furiously typing, taking notes while we're at the negotiating table with the company. And kind of their antithesis of Patrick Cropper is a guy named Michael Corbridge. He's the managing director of managing director of finance. So he's their costing official. He keeps track of the money we're spending on the company side he does all that for them. Everybody else who comes and goes kind of depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about, scheduling stuff, we've got Tim Hennerode over there, the managing director of pilot crew resources and scheduling. It just kind of depends. If we get into retirement and insurance stuff, we'll have Julie Young, who's kind of their retirement and insurance legal expert over there. Just kind of depends on what we're negotiating for everybody else. But those are the four core individuals that are almost always there.
Excellent. Great. So let's get into a little bit about where we are, just kind of high level, and what's important about this week, this next week. So, Chad, hate to, put you on the spot again, but sort of, where do we leave off negotiations right before COVID? If you could give maybe a condensed little timeline of how long we've been negotiating for pilots that are new to the property here. And then Andrew, if you want to chime in maybe on sort of mediation and what that means.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So we started negotiating in April of 2019. We opened up about 270, not almost, but exactly 270 days early from our amendable date of December 31st of 2019. Spent the rest of the year negotiating in 2019, and then everybody remembers very well the company requested that we go to mediation. So we did go into mediation in February of 2020 for about a month, a little over a month actually, and then COVID hit on March 11th, 2020. That's when we suspended negotiations. So since then, it's been kind of a triage type scenario. We've gotten some good gains. We managed to keep everybody employed, which was a good thing. Maybe a little bit of luck in there with the CARES Act funding helped us out considerably, but we were prepared either way. But we did, I think, a fairly decent job of not only preserving what we had from the inevitable onslaught from the company, but we actually made some good permanent gains that we probably otherwise wouldn't have done, but for the uniqueness of the situation. And then we're going to start again next week on the 18th, Tuesday. Is going to be our first actual Section 6 contract negotiation going forward. So we're starting it all back up just a little under 2 years from where we left off. Specifically speaking, as far as how far the contracts completed, technically speaking, we're about halfway through the sections. We've tentatively agreed to about half of the sections. I think practically speaking, that's a little under halfway there with the amount of items that are still left out on the table and the magnitude of the sections that are left. A lot of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, has been kind of finished, for lack of a better term. Nothing's finished until the entire contract's finished. And we'll be jumping back into, say, training. I think training is going to be one of the first ones. Deadhead, we're going to try to finish that up, hopefully this first negotiating session. A bunch of sections we're going to jump into. Scheduling both 12 and 23 will be some of the sections that we'll jump into. And then we have some other ancillary kind of negotiations going on as well. The market base is pretty much complete. We need to do the implementation of that, which I'm hoping, knock on wood, will happen sometime this year. People start spilling cash. They're going to want a tax deferred vehicle for that to go into. So we're working on some finishing items on that and getting it implemented, as well as the global scope, which we've been kind of advertising ad nauseum. We'll be chipping away at that this weekend, next week, actually, probably. So that's what's going on kind of in a nutshell over the next couple of weeks.
We're in mediation now, and Andrew, can you speak a little bit to what that is and sort of why we're in mediation?
Sure. Mediation, when you think mediation, the National Mediation Board, or NMB, has invoked jurisdiction, and that's usually marked by the presence of a mediator who is a neutral from the NMB. The NMB is statutorily charged under the Railway Labor Act with overseeing the negotiations and is really assisting the parties in reaching an agreement. When the NMB exercises its control over bargaining, essentially the board, as sometimes it's referred to, has the authority to determine things such as how often the parties meet, locations, where the parties meet, subjects of discussion, and of course, how long the parties remain in mediation. In other words, the NMB has the sole discretion to decide whether to release the parties in the event it's determined an impasse has been reached. I think it's important to point out sometimes people confuse mediator and arbitrator, who is also a third-party neutral. An arbitrator decides disputes, usually interpreting collective bargaining agreement in our context. Here, it's important to remember that the mediator does not decide on the specific terms of an agreement. That's left to the parties.
Sure. So we're negotiating really under the RLA now, and we always have. And can you, Andrew, just speak a little kind of high level here to what the RLA is and sort of how it applies to our negotiations right now, and then how that kind of works into a predefined negotiation process?
Right. The Railway Labor Act, which has been amended a few times, governs labor relations in the rail and airline industry. So we do not fall under the National Labor Relations Act, which sometimes people get confused. The RLA governs not just bargaining at Delta and other airlines, but it governs all of labor relations, including any adjustment of contractual disputes through the grievance and system board of adjustment process. A primary purpose of the RLA is to avoid any interruption of interstate commerce or disruption to the carrier's operation. To that extent, the RLA bargaining process is really a lengthy one, and as I mentioned previously, is controlled by the National Mediation Board. So right now we've completed direct negotiations. There's been a joint petition to the NMB. The NMB has invoked jurisdiction, and we are now in mediation, and we will remain in mediation until either an agreement is reached or the NMB determines that the parties are at an impasse, and at that point releases the parties to engage in self-help. But before that can occur, there's a 30-day cooling off period that must be exhausted after a proffer of arbitration is rejected, which starts the 30-day cooling off clock. So hopefully that kind of lays out a little bit of the timeline under the Act.
Yeah, and we're going to have resources for pilots to dig into some of this down the road as we continue to move forward. Chad, it's really hard to tell. I don't want to put you on the spot timeline wise, but let's say, let's just take a hypothetical. You're getting kind of close to the end here. What would that process look like? So you come to an agreement on basically every section that's open. What's the process moving forward? So when is the average line pilot going to get to see all of this and make some decisions?
Yeah, I wish I had that answer. The short answer is the line pilots will see an agreement when our goals are met, when the company has met the goals that we have set out for ourselves. And that's directed by the elected reps, directing the negotiating committee for the minimum standards of what a new agreement is going to look like. Until that happens, we will continue negotiating. Just to kind of take you through the process a little bit, I guess, I don't know if that's what you were asking or not, but basically how it works is we come to a conceptual agreement on each section of the contract. And once that conceptual agreement is done, we actually write the language for each of those individual sections of the contract, exactly what we have agreed to verbatim in legal contractual language. Once all 28 sections of the contract have that legal contractual language, we declare what's called a TA on the Section 6 process, and then we will send that language to the MEC. They need to have it in their hands for 7 days. About that time, we will probably, I'm guessing it's going to be up to the MEC, but generally speaking, we release a notepad, a negotiator notepad, which will have the bullet points of the highlights of the entire agreement and what it looks like. The MEC will keep that language for a minimum of 7 days in their hands and review it. And then we will have a special meeting and review that language with them, take them through it step by step, word by word, explain exactly what the agreement means and what it doesn't mean. And then they will vote on whether that TA is good enough or if they need to send us back in and keep trying. If they do vote unanimously or by a majority, that will get sent to the pilots. That is policy. That will happen. This won't just get pushed without a membership ratification. So the pilots will have an opportunity to membership ratify any new Section 6 agreement, any full contract, I guess I should say, before it becomes actual in effect. And generally speaking, they become effective immediately upon ratification. Timeline, I don't know. Obviously, we all want it sooner rather than later. That's going to kind of be in the company's hands just to put a fine point on it. And as long as they're willing to meet our goals, then it will happen sooner. If they need to be convinced to meet our goals, that tends to draw the process out a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, as a line pilot, I'm pretty excited about this, that we're finally re-engaging here, and this podcast is definitely an initiative to really put information out there and be open and transparent. So what are some ways that pilots can stay engaged in the process?
Yeah, Evan, thanks. That's essential. We need our pilots to stay engaged, be in the loop on where we're at in this process. Stay up to date, read what we put out. Every comm we put out, listen to podcasts. We have a folder on the iPad that has everything in it that you could need. So easy to find. Feedback to your reps. Keep talking to your reps. Let us know what you're thinking, what you see. Ongoing polling. We're going to make sure that we keep polling throughout this process so we're getting what the pilots want. Answer that phone. The best way to tell us what you want is answer that phone when the New Hampshire number calls and give us that feedback. That is statistically valid feedback that is essential for your reps to continue charting the direction.
Excellent, great. We're definitely going to keep doing this. I think this is a good way, to get to know everybody. Chad, anything you want to add to that in terms of ways pilots can keep their priorities heard, or can you speak to what the negotiating committee would like to see and is helpful for you guys?
Yeah, I think Jason actually hit on most of the points. Your elected reps are the conduit to the negotiating committee. They do all the directing of the negotiating committee. We certainly get emails and we certainly welcome emails. We do our best to respond to them. In fact, I've designated one specifically during the contract to be in charge of responding to emails. But I can't stress enough, the elected representatives, your elected representatives are the conduit. They have the power to direct the negotiating committee. The only other thing I'll really address is rumors. Some of us are at various levels of social media participation. I happen to be on Facebook. I don't think much of the rest of my team is actually. I don't get a chance to be on Facebook much, but I do see the rumors there. If you haven't heard it from us, if you haven't seen it in a comm from us, or you haven't heard it from your elected representatives, then it is just that, a rumor. And I can't stress enough that unfounded rumors are the devil. It's a problem. Don't let rumors get out of control. You'll hear them there. You'll hear a lot of stuff out there. If you have a question, contact your reps, because that's where the accurate information will come from, or from the negotiating committee. I would caution everybody not to let the rumor mill get out of control. The unity amongst pilots is going to be absolutely crucial in this negotiation to meet the goals that we've set for ourselves.
Thanks, Evan, Chad, Andrew, for being part of this today. Obviously, we'll streamline the process as we go forward. Thank you to the pilots for your continued engagement. Please keep it up. As Chad said, your reps drive the direction based on the will of the pilot group. I know that I'm looking forward to restarting negotiations, as you are as well. Stay engaged in polling, surveys. Again, we want to ensure that we keep the pulse of what you, the pilots, want. Your priorities drive these negotiations. Stay informed. Continue to look for important information from your union as we progress down this process. We'll continue this podcast series as well as other communications venues to keep you abreast of where we are in negotiations. Again, what's our goal? Deliver you a contract reflective of Delta's place in this industry. If the company can invest billions of dollars in our joint venture partners, they certainly can and should invest in us. Thank you for joining us, and turn it back to you, Evan.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. Chad, thank you for joining us. Andrew, thank you. We've learned a lot about the negotiations process and kind of where we stand. I sure have. We're going to put a transcript of today's podcast in the show notes as well. So if you can't listen, we'll have a transcript of the podcast available to read. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to host some discussions with union leadership at least once a month, just to get good information out there in another format. So please subscribe to the podcast and stay engaged. Continue to reach out directly to your reps. And we really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Engage. It's our second episode, and we would really enjoy it if you could provide feedback on the podcast to the communications committee. You can reach us through DART, which is available on the MEC website, or through the ALPA app. And until then, we'll see you next time on another episode of Engage. Thanks for joining us.
This has been Engage, a podcast from the Delta Master Executive Council. Tune in next month for more content by pilots for pilots.